I should have known something was wrong the moment I saw Karen standing on my doorstep with a clipboard. It was my first week in the Riverside Estates community, and I was still unpacking boxes in my newly rented townhouse. The place was perfect, a quiet suburban neighborhood with tree-lined streets and well-maintained properties. I had moved here for work, taking a position at a consulting firm downtown, and I was looking forward to a peaceful place to come home to each evening. Karen introduced herself as the president of the H.O.A., her smile tight and professional. She was in her mid-50s with precisely styled blonde hair and the kind of outfit that screamed, "I need to speak to your manager." She handed me a thick binder of community rules and regulations, her eyes scanning me up and down in a way that made me uncomfortable. "Welcome to Riverside Estates," she said, though her tone suggested she meant the opposite. "I'm sure you'll find our community standards very comprehensive. We maintain a certain quality here. Before you hear how this unfolds, do me a favor and hit that like button if you're enjoying the story so far, and subscribe to Karen Eat World for more tales of epic neighborhood justice. Trust me, you won't want to miss where this is going." I thanked her politely and took the binder, assuming this was just standard HOA procedure. I had dealt with homeowners associations before, and while they could be particular, I figured following the rules would be simple enough. I was wrong. The complaints started within days. First, it was a written notice about my outdoor welcome mat, which apparently was 2 inches too wide according to Section 7.3 of the Community Guidelines. Then it was about the curtains in my front window, which were deemed not uniform with the neighborhood aesthetic. I replaced them with the approved neutral tones, thinking that would be the end of it. It was not the end of it. Karen found new violations weekly. My car was parked 3 inches over the designated parking space line. My porch light was on past 10 p.m., which violated the light pollution clause. I had hung a small bird feeder that was classified as an unapproved structure. Each violation came with a formal letter, a fine, and Karen's personal visit to ensure I understood the severity of my infractions. I tried to be understanding. I worked in conflict resolution professionally, and I knew that some people just needed to feel heard and respected. I attended HOA meetings, always dressed professionally, and I was unfailingly polite to everyone, including Karen. But her behavior only intensified. One afternoon, my colleague Sarah stopped by to drop off some files for a project we were working on. She stayed maybe 15 minutes and we chatted on my front porch before she left. The next day, I received a citation for excessive visitor traffic and loitering in common view areas. The fine was $200. That is when I realized this was not about rules. This was personal. I started paying attention to how Karen interacted with other neighbors. She was strict with everyone certainly, but with me there was an edge of hostility that seemed disproportionate. She would stare at my townhouse from her own home across the street. She would happen to be checking her mailbox whenever I came home from work. She found reasons to walk past my place multiple times a day. The breaking point came on a Saturday morning. I had some friends visiting from out of town, 2 couples I had known since college. We were having brunch on my back patio, which was a private, enclosed space. We were not being loud, just enjoying conversation and catching up. Suddenly, Karen appeared at my back gate, demanding entry. "I've received noise complaints," she announced, though my patio shared no walls with any neighbors. "I need to inspect for unauthorized gatherings." I politely declined, explaining that my guests were well within the visitor limits outlined in the HOA rules, and we were on private property. Her face turned red. "Don't think you can just come into this neighborhood and ignore our standards," she snapped. "Some of us actually care about maintaining property values and community reputation. We worked hard to build this community, and we will not have it undermined." My friend Marcus, who happened to be a real estate attorney, raised an eyebrow but said nothing. After Karen left, he pulled out his phone and started taking notes. "You want me to look into this?" he asked. Because that was not normal HOA enforcement. That was harassment. I told him I would handle it, but I appreciated the offer. I still believed I could resolve this reasonably. I requested a private meeting with Karen to discuss her concerns. Maybe she felt threatened by a new resident. Maybe there had been bad tenants before me. I wanted to extend an olive branch. The meeting did not go as planned. Karen sat across from me in the community clubhouse, arms crossed, and listened to my attempts at reconciliation with visible disdain. When I finished, she leaned forward. "Let me be clear," she said. "This neighborhood has standards. We are a family community with values. When someone like you moves in, turning heads and drawing attention, it disrupts the social fabric we have carefully maintained. People talk. Husbands notice things. It creates problems." I sat back, stunned. So that was it. Karen saw me as some kind of threat, not because of anything I had done, but simply because of how I looked. It was so absurd I almost laughed. But the look in her eyes told me this was deadly serious to her. "I have not done anything inappropriate," I said calmly. "I go to work, I come home, I mind my own business. If you're experiencing personal insecurities, that's something you need to address. But it's not my responsibility to make myself smaller to accommodate them." Her expression turned ice cold. "We will see about that," she said. The harassment escalated dramatically. Karen filed a complaint with the county about my supposed business operations because I occasionally worked from home. She called in a noise complaint to the police at 8 p.m. on a Tuesday when I was watching television at normal volume. She sent certified letters threatening legal action for violations I had not committed, with increasingly aggressive language. She also started a whisper campaign. I began noticing other neighbors giving me odd looks. One neighbor, an older gentleman named Robert, actually approached me to say that Karen had been spreading rumors that I was running some kind of inappropriate business from my home. He did not believe her, he assured me, but he thought I should know what was being said. I documented everything. Every letter, every fine, every interaction. I had security cameras installed that captured Karen's frequent surveillance of my property. I consulted with Marcus about my options. Technically, Karen was not doing anything illegal, just weaponizing the H.O.A rules and her position to make my life miserable. A harassment lawsuit would be difficult to prove and expensive to pursue. Then Karen made her biggest mistake. She filed a formal complaint with the landlord who owned my townhouse, claiming I was violating the lease terms and demanding my eviction. The complaint was filled with exaggerations and outright lies. She claimed I was damaging the property, disturbing the peace, and bringing down neighborhood values. She demanded immediate action. My landlord, fortunately, was a reasonable man who had known me for several years through mutual business connections. He forwarded me Karen's complaint and asked for my side of the story. I sent him my complete documentation. He was appalled by what he read. "I'm not evicting you," he told me over the phone. "But I want you to know, I've been thinking about selling this property anyway. I'm getting older and don't want to deal with rental management anymore. If you're interested in buying, I'll give you first right of refusal at a fair price." An idea began forming in my mind. I asked him to give me a week before making any decisions. Then I made some calls. My job in consulting had given me connections across various industries, including real estate development and property law. I also had family money that I rarely mentioned or used, preferring to make my own way. But this situation called for resources. Marcus helped me research the HOA's governing documents, bylaws, and the property records for Riverside Estates. What we discovered was fascinating. The neighborhood had been developed 20 years ago by a company that had since dissolved. The HOA had been established with certain founding documents that gave specific powers to the board, but there were loopholes, big ones, that had never been addressed. Most interesting was the ownership structure. The common areas, playground, clubhouse, and the small park were owned collectively by the HOA, but the management company that handled the financials was a separate entity with a contract that could be terminated with sufficient votes. More importantly, there were several undeveloped parcels around the neighborhood that were still owned by the original developer's estate, which had gone into probate and was being managed by a trust. I reached out to the trust administrator through my attorney. The parcels were small, considered unbuildable due to their odd shapes and sizes, landlocked between existing properties. The trust was willing to sell them for a remarkably low price just to clear them from the books. I bought all 4 parcels in a single transaction. 3 of them were useless to me, just odd strips of land, but the 4th parcel was interesting. It was a narrow strip of land that ran along the back of several properties, including Karen's. According to the original plat maps, this strip included the access easement to the community park and clubhouse. The access road that everyone used ran directly through this parcel. I also bought my townhouse from my landlord. Then I bought 2 other rental properties in the neighborhood, whose owners were willing to sell. With 3 owned properties, I now had enough voting power to call for special HOA meetings and propose changes to the bylaws. But I was not done. I hired a property surveyor to do a comprehensive survey of the entire neighborhood, particularly focusing on encroachments and easement violations. The results were remarkable. Karen's property, it turned out, had several violations that had existed since her home was built. Her fence extended 6 inches onto HOA common property. Her driveway had been expanded at some point and now encroached onto the community easement. Her garden shed was built partially on the strip of land that I now owned. I compiled a meticulous report. Then I scheduled a special HOA meeting, which was my right as a property owner with multiple units. I invited an attorney who specialized in property law to attend as a guest speaker on the topic of ensuring HOA compliance and legal protections. The meeting was well attended. Karen sat in the front row, clearly suspicious but unable to prevent a properly called meeting. I stood up and began my presentation. I want to start by thanking everyone for their dedication to maintaining our community standards, I said. Standards are important. Rules matter. And they should be applied equally and fairly to everyone, including board members. That is why I have commissioned a comprehensive property survey to ensure we are all in compliance with not just HOA rules, but county regulations and property law. I watched Karen's face as I displayed the survey results on the screen. Her fence violation, her driveway encroachment, her shed placement, each one meticulously documented with photographs, measurements, and legal citations. Now, according to our HOA bylaws, I continued, property encroachments on common areas require immediate remediation and are subject to daily fines until corrected. The fines for these violations, calculated from the date of construction, would amount to approximately $47,000 for the fence, $32,000 for the driveway, and $18,000 for the shed. Karen shot to her feet. This is ridiculous. Those structures have been there for years. This is clearly a targeted attack. You are absolutely right that they have been there for years, I agreed. Which is why the fines have accumulated. However, I'm prepared to propose a solution. If you resign from the HOA board immediately and agree to cease all enforcement activities, I will personally waive the fines for these common area encroachments, as is my right as a property owner with voting interest. Her face was purple. You cannot do this. Actually, my attorney stood up, she can. But there is more you should know, Mr. President. My client now owns the access easement to the community facilities. Every time you drive to the clubhouse or park, you are using her property. She has been generous in allowing continued access, but that is a revocable license, not a permanent easement. The room erupted in confused chatter. Another board member demanded clarification. My attorney explained the property ownership history and the current situation. Technically, I could block access to the community amenities that Karen prized so highly. However, I said, raising my voice over the noise, I have no interest in disrupting the community. I'm proposing a simple solution. The board will be restructured to include more diverse representation. A new management company will be hired that focuses on reasonable enforcement rather than targeted harassment. And certain board members who have abused their positions will step down. I looked directly at Karen. You wanted to maintain standards, Karen. You wanted rules followed precisely. Well, here we are. Your own property is in violation of multiple regulations that you yourself have enforced against others. Your shed is partially built on land that I now own, which makes it both an encroachment and an unauthorized structure on private property. You can remove it at your own expense, or I can file for its removal and add those legal costs to your bill. But the real issue, I continued, is not the violations. It is how you have weaponized the HOA against residents you personally dislike. I have documentation of every interaction, every complaint, every fine you have issued to me. I also have testimony from other residents about your selective enforcement and the hostile environment you have created. A hostile housing environment, Karen, can be grounds for legal action under fair housing laws, especially when it is based on discriminatory intent. Marcus stood up. As an attorney specializing in property law, I have reviewed this case. While proving discrimination can be challenging, the pattern of behavior documented here combined with statements made by the board president admitting to targeting the complainant based on personal bias, creates a strong foundation for legal action. It also opens up potential liability for the HOA itself if the board fails to take corrective action. Karen looked around the room desperately, searching for support. But the other residents were looking at her with a mixture of shock and realization. Many of them had been on the receiving end of her enforcement actions. Now they were seeing that her authority was not as absolute as she had pretended. "This is extortion," Karen finally managed. "No," I corrected. "This is enforcement. This is holding someone accountable to the exact same standards they demanded of others. You taught me something valuable, Karen. Rules matter. Documentation matters. And having the resources to ensure those rules are applied fairly, that matters most of all." I advanced to my final slide. I'm prepared to donate the easement access to the HOA permanently, ensuring everyone can use the community facilities. I'll waive all violation fines that have accumulated. I'll even cover the cost of hiring a professional, neutral management company for the first year. All I require is your resignation from the board, a formal apology for the harassment, and a commitment from the remaining board members to implement fair and reasonable enforcement policies going forward. The vote was called. Karen was removed from the board by an overwhelming margin. The other board members, seeing the writing on the wall, quickly agreed to all of my proposed reforms. The meeting adjourned with plans to implement the new management structure immediately. Karen sat frozen in her chair as people filed out, some avoiding eye contact with her, others openly discussing how relieved they were to see changes coming. She finally looked up at me, and I saw the exact moment the full scope of what had happened hit her. She had not just lost her position, she had been beaten at her own game, using her own weapons, by someone she had underestimated completely. The power she had wielded so carelessly had been stripped away, and the rules she had enforced so zealously had been turned against her with devastating precision. If you enjoyed watching Karen get exactly what she deserved, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe to Karen Eat World. We've got plenty more stories of entitled people getting their comeuppance in the most satisfying ways possible. Trust me, you won't want to miss what is coming next.